Blue Book Inside the Darkest Mind's Introduction. The literature of the broken self. There are books that amuse us, books that inspire, and books that comfort. But then there are the rare, unsettling works that force us to confront the shadows we try so hard to ignore. These books examine not who we pretend to be, but who we become when every mask is stripped away. They dissect consciousness like a surgeon's scalpel, cold, precise, and unflinching. The works explored in this documentary span continents, genres, and centuries, yet they share a common obsession: the instability of identity. Whether through metamorphosis, murder, ennui, alienation, or madness, each narrative reveals the uncomfortable truth that humanity is not a fixed state. It is a fragile pact, constantly threatened by forces within and without. Tonight, we journey through 7 masterpieces of psychological darkness, not to glorify the horrors within them, but to understand the deeper meaning they point toward. This is a tour of the human abyss. Chapter 1. The Metamorphosis. A man reduced to his usefulness, the sudden collapse of identity. Franz Kafka opens his haunting tale with one of the most famous transformations in literature. Gregor Samsa awakens to find himself turned into a monstrous insect. The metamorphosis occurs without explanation, and the world reacts with cruel efficiency. Gregor's value to his family had always been transactional. He was their breadwinner, their stability, their financial lifeline. Once he loses his usefulness, he loses his identity. Alienation and conditional love. Kafka illustrates a chilling truth. Often, people love not the individual, but the function the individual performs. Gregor's family begins with fear, shifts into shame, and finally settles into resentment. The home slowly becomes a prison cell. Every room that once symbolized comfort becomes a hostile environment, and every interaction becomes a reminder that Gregor is no longer considered human. The slow erasure of the self. The tragedy of Gregor Samsa isn't the transformation. It's the world's reaction to it. As Gregor adjusts to his insect body, the family adjusts to a life without him. In their view, he is now a burden, an embarrassment, an obstacle. Kafka's story becomes a profound metaphor for anyone who has ever felt unseen, misunderstood, or reduced to a single role in the eyes of others. Chapter 2. Blood Meridian. A universe where violence is God. The mythic landscape of brutality. Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian transports us to a harsh and mythologized American West, where violence does not merely occur, it reigns. The kid, drifting through a savage landscape, joins a scalp-hunting gang whose purpose is nothing more than destruction. Violence is not depicted as a moral failing but as a cosmic principle, indifferent and omnipresent. Judge Holden. The embodiment of war. At the center stands Judge Holden, one of the most terrifying figures in literature. Smooth-skinned, hairless, scholarly, articulate, charismatic, and monstrous, the judge represents war personified. His philosophy is stark. War is the ultimate truth of existence, and everything else is illusion. Through him, McCarthy suggests that humanity's greatest horrors are self-created and self-worshipped. The kid's struggle against moral absorption. While the kid is far from innocent, he possesses a flicker of conscience, a faint resistance to becoming fully monstrous. In the judge's eyes, this makes him a threat. The novel becomes a philosophical battlefield between absolute violence and the faint possibility of human decency. Chapter 3. American Psycho. The Mask of Perfection and the Void Behind It. The Hollow Life of Patrick Bateman. American Psycho is a razor-sharp satire disguised as a horror story. Patrick Bateman, a wealthy investment banker, leads a life defined by obsessive routines, luxury brands, and meaningless surface interactions. Despite his outward success, he is profoundly empty, an avatar of capitalism's ugliest excesses. Violence as an act of desperation. Bateman's violent fantasies, and possibly his real actions, Ellis leaves this ambiguous, stem from his inability to feel anything. The brutality is not the point. The numbness is. Bateman destroys to confirm his existence, each act a scream into the void. Yet no one notices. No one cares. The world around him is just as vacant, just as disconnected, just as lost. Satire of an emotionless society. The novel's true horror lies in its world, not its protagonist. Bateman is simply the final evolutionary form of a culture that worships wealth, beauty, and status while ignoring humanity. Chapter 4. The Stranger. A man on trial for not playing the game. The Indifference of Meursault. Albert Camus' The Stranger tells the story of Meursault, a man who does not perform the expected rituals of human emotion. His mother dies. He does not cry. He kills a man. He feels nothing. The legal system prosecutes not the crime but his failure to conform. The absurdity of existence. Meursault embodies Camus' philosophy of the absurd, the conflict between humanity's desire for meaning and the universe's indifference. Meursault is not evil. He is simply honest in ways society cannot accept. Condemned for emotional non-participation in the courtroom, the real crime is his refusal to pretend. Society demands performance. Meursault refuses, and for this he is condemned. The novel exposes how deeply we distrust those who do not adhere to emotional norms. Chapter 5. No Longer Human. A man who can't belong. The fragmented identity of Yozo Osamu Dazai's semi-autobiographical novel follows Yozo Oba, a man who feels fundamentally disconnected from humanity. His life is a series of masks worn to hide despair, anxiety, and self-hatred. This mask-making becomes habitual, then suffocating. The descent through self-destruction. Yozo moves from one failed attempt at life to another. Relationships, vices, addictions, each worsening the fracture within him. The novel captures the essence of alienation so sharply that it feels like a confession. A portrait of psychological collapse. No Longer Human resonates because it articulates emotions many feel but cannot express. Shame, isolation, the fear of being unworthy of love. Yozo becomes the symbol of a person who loses the ability to be human in the eyes of society, and eventually in his own. Chapter 6. Exquisite Corpse. Obsession in its darkest form. The intersection of love and horror. Poppy Z. Bright's Exquisite Corpse is not a traditional horror novel. It is an exploration of obsession, identity, and forbidden desire. The narrative dives into the darkest corners of intimacy, revealing how destructive desires can masquerade as connection. Characters as reflections of extremes. The protagonists are not merely killers. They are emotional voids seeking meaning in the only way they understand, through destruction and possession. Their interactions are coded with a twisted longing, an eerie romanticism that unsettles the reader. Beauty entwined with horror. Bright's writing is lush, gothic, sensual, and sickening. It challenges the boundaries of what relationships can become when empathy evaporates. The horror arises not from shock, but from the emotional sincerity behind the darkness. Chapter 7. House of Leaves. The labyrinth that understands you. A story within a story. Within a story. House of Leaves is a puzzle made of fear. The Navidson family discovers that their home contains a shifting, impossible labyrinth. The space inside is larger than the space outside. The house breaks physics and slowly breaks the minds of those who enter. The documentary that consumes the viewer. The Navidson Record, a fictional documentary within the novel, becomes an obsession for Zampano, the blind scholar who analyzes it. Johnny Truant, who discovers Zampano's notes, begins to go insane as he attempts to edit the manuscript. The reader becomes the third participant in this spiral. The house is a metaphor for trauma. The endlessly shifting corridors mirror psychological wounds. Uncharted, vast, terrifying, and deeply personal. The novel's typography mimics panic, claustrophobia, disorientation, turning the very experience of reading into a simulation of madness.